Hey everybody, Doug here. If you were following us on social media, you were probably expecting our episode on our favorite songs of 1998. That was the planned release for today, but then things kind of changed out there in the real world when the United States decided to drop some bombs on Iran. And it seemed like, well, maybe the right episode for the times we live in was to take our upcoming episode on war games and do it today. So it just seemed very prescient to do that. Now, if you are in the mood for some musical podcasting, I'm pleased to announce that today we are launching our sister podcast called Playing by Ear. So go look for that. You can find a link to it in the show notes, of course, but go look for Playing by Ear wherever you listen to this podcast. It's myself, my wife, Amy, and my brother-in-law, Kyle. Each month we will be taking an album and breaking it down track by track. So today our very first episode is Mr. A to Z by Jason Mraz, as today also happens to be his birthday. So go check that out. And I guess we can really only kick this podcast on WarGames off with one key question.
Shall we play a game?
Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting...
Your mom always told you that video games were bad for you, but I don't think she thought about it being really quite this bad. We're talking about war games, or as it's technically pronounced because of its spelling, WarGames, with no space in between. So this is a great movie, a 1983 classic starring Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, about just a little light comedy about the end of the world. So I'm really glad to be digging it to this one. It's a stone cold 80s classic. And to help me do it is a semi-professional podcast guest who has been on the podcast previously talking about Fallout. Please welcome back to the show, BT Moore.
Hello, everybody. Yes, we're kind of making a little tie-in. Fallout, probably a movie that was or video game inspired by war games for sure. And
yeah, I was going to say, you got a thing for thermonuclear war?
Apparently. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
Look for him on our next episode, Dr. Strangelove.
Exactly. And we can do fail-safe and with the other...
I'm sorry, we've already done Terminator 1 and 2, so that's out.
Right,
but
right.
There's no shortage of them. And I think that's for good reason. I think this movie speaks to a very real apprehension about yes, the Cold War and nuclear war, the fears of, the latter half of the 20th century. But I think our very real fears here, as we are now a quarter of the way into the 21st century, about the dangers of letting AI run things.
Exactly. And we're still dealing with hackers hacking into stuff, and we've got to worry about that. So it's like the three things that this movie deals with are even more of a concern today. And any one of these topics, whether it's nuclear war or AI computers or hackers, you could make a movie just on one of those three things, and this movie has all three.
Or just the threat of Dabney Coleman.
Right. America's dad? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I was watching this, it's been a while since I've seen it. I know I watched this when I was a kid, but it's been decades since I've seen it. I wasn't quite seeing it for the first time, but close. And watching it now, just realizing how unbelievably prescient this thing is kind of disquieting.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of connections to other movies like Dabney Coleman. I believe around that same time, reason I call him American's Dad is because he was in a movie called Cloak and Dagger, which is also a very Cold War spy kid, little, lighthearted Disney movie that he plays like this kid's imagine his dad, both his dad and his imaginary friend. So, if you're a kid and you watch this movie, you're like, wow, I get both. I get like the responsible dad, and I get the fun imaginary friend role in one, in one. And but basically, like everybody in this movie, it knocks it out of the park, and as an actor, in my opinion. And they have, look any of these people up, and they have over 150 acting credits at least each. Every character actor in this is just so spot on, and went on to do other things. And we can get into that as we go through the movie of like who they are and what else have you seen them in, because I think pretty much everybody in there, even if they had a really minor role, had you've seen them in tons of stuff since then. So
Yeah, lots of familiar faces here, and the like everything about this is just so on point. Like I'd forgotten how good it was. It was nominated for best original screenplay. Um, I mean, and I think it deserves it, right? There's a lot of really smart things that go into this, and even though the hacking is obviously and the computer technology is very 1983, there's nothing about this that feels dated other than maybe the look of some of the things. Like by and large, except for the fact that we now have cell phones, this movie could be pretty easily adapted to 2025.
sure. But yeah, there are a lot of little quirky moments in the movie, and we see like his mom is like a real estate agent, and back then all the real estate agents had like some sort of yellow blazer with a real estate patch on them. That was a very like 80s thing. So there's all sorts of cultural nostalgia things in there. But it's like, as far as I remember, the first, computers in the home were really new at that time, and so it's the first movie we saw a kid using a computer other than playing tic-tac-toe on a computer or something like that. The first kind of computer with a voice I mean, sure, we've seen a lot of this stuff on like shows like Star Trek and movies like that, but as far as like something that's set in the present where there's a computer that's talking to you like it's intelligent, and some of this stuff they did to make it easier for the audience if the computer talks, so you don't have to read the screen. And also when Broderick's like typing on the computer, something he had to learn how to do for the movie, because he had never typed before. Because who would at that time, unless you're going to be a secretary, you wouldn't know how to use a keyboard. But he's talking while he's typing, and so we don't have to read. And that's
Right.
something that like you wouldn't necessarily do in real life. Like I don't talk out what I type, but it comes off unless you're really like paying attention, like you don't really notice that, you don't think that's an odd thing to do. It just flows so naturally of like, I want to play global thermonuclear war, like as he's typing it in. Um, so do we want to kind of start at the beginning and go
Well,
through like the key points, or how are we
in a,
working that?
yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
I kind of jumped the usual format here because normally the first thing we talk about is our nostalgic memories of the movies, but you pinged something for me, which is our nostalgic memories of computers in the 80s. Like we didn't have a PC in our house until I wanted of some kind, a computer in the home until roughly would have been around 89, 90, because my dad worked in computers, so that was like a thing for him to have that. It was sometime, yeah, it must have been around 88, 89. We did have an Atari that had like a keyboard peripheral, so I did learn to type on things like that. We had like a speak and spell, those toys. So you did get some practice with a QWERTY keyboard, and we had a typewriter. But yeah, I think we take it for granted, right? They're so ubiquitous now.
Right.
You're the thing you carry with you in your pocket is 50 times more powerful than almost anything we've sent into space in the last 50 years, right?
Yeah, I was about 6 years old when this movie came out, so I didn't see it in the theaters. I probably saw it, maybe when I was 10 or something, on TV. And I wouldn't have a computer. The first computer we had was the original Macintosh, or like maybe it was the Mac Plus, when I was around 8, I want to say, but I can't really pin it down more than that. But it would be years before we had like a modem and then dial up and those kinds of things. But I remember I did get into like there were bulletin board services. I did that for a little, pre-internet, of like you can call in and connect to some other computer and, you know, chat with people or something, like, you know. But yeah, all this was like very, very new in the movie, and it really kind of kicked off this whole computer culture, whether it's, you know, hacking culture or computer games, um, and that's that sort of thing. Like this movie kind of birthed all this into the public awareness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, just that feel like any new technology that comes along kind of finds its way into the movies as being like almost magic, right? Like in the 50s, it was always the atom, you know, could do anything.
Right.
And then when we got computers here, like computers, you know, there was like, they're not quite magic, but like you look at something like Tron, right? There's like a mystery and a wonder to like what's really going on in this circuitry that we're developing. And this movie kind of thrives in that space. But yeah, to move on to the movie itself, tell me your nostalgic memories of WarGames and why you wanted to talk about it today.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, it has these three elements that are really cool that you could make a complete movie about it. But I think as like just as a straight movie, it is executed so well. The structure of the movie, the direction, like everybody just knocks it out of the park. I think the opening scene with the two missile silo guys, who is John Spencer,
Right.
really young John Spencer, who we know as FBI director from The Rock and from The West Wing, and Michael Madsen, who is in all these Quentin Tarantino movies. Like these guys were unknowns at the time, and you know, it's played off as these guys are just going to their job. Nonchalantly, are they handed a revolver and some bullets like as they go in, as they're talking about like their commute, which I didn't notice until I watched it like yesterday, that they're being handed like a revolver and bullets. It's so like downplayed. It just, and then they go into we've got all sorts of vaulted doors, of course, like, you know, this is another thing that, you know, influenced Fallout, and this whole situation that, you know, they get the order to launch their missiles, and one of the guys can't do it, wants to get confirmation, and the other guy points his gun at him and says, "Turn the key."
Sir.
T-minus 40.
Enable missiles. Number 1 enabled. 2 enabled. 3 enabled. 4,
Straight to
5,
somebody in the goddamn
6,
phone.
7, 8, 9, 10. All missiles enabled.
Minus 30.
Get me wing command post on your direct
That's
line.
not the correct procedure, Captain.
SAC. Try SAC headquarters on the HF.
That's not the correct procedure.
Screw the procedure. I want somebody on the goddamn phone before I kill 20 million people.
T-minus 20.
I got nothing here. They might have been knocked out already.
Right. On my mark, rotate launch keys to launch.
Roger, ready to go to launch.
14.
13, 12, 11.
7. 6. 5.
Sir, we have a launch
4,
order.
3.
Put your hand on the keys,
2,
sir.
1. Launch.
Sir, we are at launch. Turn your keys.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Turn your keys, sir.
And so we've got this like really right up from the bat, this really high stakes situation of like these guys could be ordered to end the world, and one guy's going to shoot the other guy in the head, which really wouldn't get him to turn the key, but he's going to do whatever he can to get the guy to follow through on his duty. And of course, we find it's a test, and this is what kind of sparks off the movie of like, oh, we can't really depend on humans to make this decision. We've got to put a computer in charge in case the humans chicken out or the humans get killed. Like we need a computer robot is going to be a more dependable apparatus to make sure that the missiles get launched. And so this is what kicks off the whole movie, and it sets it up so well. We get the stakes. There's all this. There's a realism, because these guys are like just going in like any other job, but their job is missile silo guys, And
Yeah, it's a great opening because it sets the tone so well, right? Because for these guys, this is so ho hum, right? It's Tuesday, whatever. Because I guess you figure you work in the nuclear missile end of the world silo, how often are you going to get the order to end the world? Well, once, every other day, it's probably a lot of sitting around and, doing a crossword puzzle. And,
right.
To watch this tense situation unfold, and it asks this kind of unanswerable question that is at the heart of the movie, which is like the beauty of having a human being do it is that the human being will give things a second thought. They'll have ethics. They'll have, a sense of like, even though they might have a sense of duty, that like the guy's like, but I want to verify this before I murder millions and millions of people.
Right. I want to double check.
Right. Now, the disadvantage, of course, is if in fact, the Russians have already launched their missiles first, it's like if you don't launch, everyone's dead and you've done nothing to defend your country, right? It's too late. So it's like, well, then we need the machines to just, if you execute the order, the president gives the order, it just happens, right? There is no second thought. And so this movie wants to ask, like, is it better to have someone have that second thought, or is it better to be able to execute flawlessly without it's like the good side and the bad side of human error.
Right. Well, I mean, there's the argument is that like, if the Russians have really launched the missiles, everyone's going to die. And so whether I launched my missile or not is not going to have much of an impact on the situation. So I would rather err on the side of caution and not launch it. And by accident, that would be the worst thing. And then I would be responsible for ending the world and killing, millions of people. And like, have that on your conscience very briefly before the whole world explodes. So, yeah, it's quite the highest stakes job that you could possibly have.
Right. I mean, and we're only 20 years out from the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Where we lived this for real,
right.
In a way, and again, this movie's looking at this and going like, but we got out of the Cuban Missile Crisis because cooler heads prevailed on both sides of the Atlantic. And here it's like, you're removing that safeguard,
right.
The unanswerable questions. It's great. So we go from this, we get a bunch of like happy kind of march music because we don't see how this resolves. Like, it's just the guy's pointing the gun at his face and he's yelling at him to turn the key, and we just cut to titles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we watch a bunch of like kind of people coming into NORAD in Colorado, this tunnel, and we have Pat Healy, this lady who's, I'm not sure what her title is, but she's some kind of functionary there. And she brings in Lyle Watson and Arthur Cabot. They're there to meet Dr. McKittrick, who is Dabney Coleman. He runs this facility. And we go into mission control. And up on the screen is what looks kind of like Missile Command.
Right.
These very 4-bit maps of the world and lots of stats.
The most expensive set ever built for a movie at that time. It was over $1 million. Yeah. So it was about 8% of the budget or 10% of the budget. They made the movie is apparently for $12 million, which is crazy. I mean, obviously like inflation, but still. And I think it made like
about 10 times that.
Yeah. About 10 times what the budget was, but they spent at least $1 million on the set, but I mean, the level of actors they got, like, you couldn't get this much talent for nothing. All these guys, I mean, whoever was the casting just was amazing at getting all these people when they were basically unknown and all had huge careers after this.
Yeah. No, you're right. The casting person definitely had a good eye for talent here, and the set too. I mean, we're going to spend a lot of time on this set, so it has to look good and it has to look convincing as NORAD. Where we are. And I'll ask, have you ever been to Portland?
Haven't been to Portland. I've been to Seattle. So isn't that where it opens on Seattle? Or
it is, but the reason I mentioned Portland is there is an arcade there called Ground Control, where I've been. And I if you're ever in Portland, Oregon, you feel like dropping by a really cool barcade. I mean, it's a great arcade, but the motif, like this, it looks like this on the inside. It's all these screens, and it's very evocative of the WarGames war room.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we're getting this big meeting. There's lots of, generals and military brass, and they're all kind of debating exactly what we were just talking about, which is it good that the humans prevented World War III in this instance? Probably, but there's also a concern that, again, they were hesitant to pull the trigger, and that might be time we couldn't get back. And that's why Dabney Coleman is pushing to have all of this automated by their AI.
These computers give us instant access to the state of the world, troop movements, Soviet missile tests, shifting weather patterns. It all flows into this room and then into what we call the Whopper computer.
Whopper, what is that?
It's a War Operation Plan Response. This is Mr. Richter. Paul, would you like to tell these gentlemen about the Whopper?
Well, the Whopper spends all its time thinking about World War III. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it plays an endless series of war games using all available information on the state of the world. The Whopper has already fought World War III as a game, time and time again. It estimates Soviet responses to our responses to their responses, and so on. Estimates damage, counts the dead, then it looks for ways to improve its score.
But the point is that the key decisions of every conceivable option in a nuclear crisis have already been made by the Whopper.
So what you're telling me is that all this trillion-dollar hardware is really at the mercy of those men with the little brass keys?
That's exactly right. Whose only problem is that they're human beings. But in, 30 days, we could replace them with electronic relays. Get the men out of the loop.
Gentlemen, I wouldn't trust this overgrown pile of microchips any further than I could throw it. And I don't know if you want to trust the safety of our country to some silicone diode.
General, nobody is talking about entrusting the safety of the nation to a machine, for God's sake. We'll keep control, but we'll keep it here at the top where it belongs.
All right, gentlemen. I think I'm going to recommend McKittrick's idea to the president, and I'll get back to you on this.
Exactly. And he has some line about he can't send some head shrinker BS to the president about why these guys can't, pull the trigger, and they don't want to deal with, psychologically analyzing people and picking them better. It's just like, this is a simple solution. The computer is 100% reliable. And so we should, fire all these guys and just switch it to computer control so they can control everything in one place, centralized control. And we have, Barry Corbin, who is the most Texas actor you can get, playing, the Air Force general that, of course, doesn't take, doesn't trust technology, and is hesitant, but he also doesn't want, to get into the head shrinker stuff either, and just kind of wants results. So they come to agreement that, we want the computer to control this thing.
Right. And we meet the computer. It's called Whopper, WOPR,
Yep.
War Operation Plan Response. And he says all this computer does is think about World War III all day. It just runs scenarios and plays war games using information to run simulations. It estimates moves and attacks and counterattacks. And as you said, General Barry Corbin there, he says, I wouldn't trust an overgrown pile of microchips. You shouldn't trust the safety of the nation to a machine. But nevertheless, they're going to recommend Dabney Coleman's ideas to the president because this seems to be that's the way the wind's blowing.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, they're usually the rationale is like, well, the Russians are going to do the same thing and we've got to beat them. So, we've got to be willing to outplay them in some way. So, that's usually how at least in the movies, how things get motivated of like, well, the Russians are going to do it if we don't do it first. So
it's an arms race. Literally, that's what it was. And I mean, that was the whole point of mutually assured destruction, which was like the idea of like, if we both agree that we have the capability to completely obliterate both of ourselves, then the only self-interested thing you can do is not do that.
Right.
That's the lesson we learned in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And as we'll see, that's not a lesson the machine has learned yet. And in a way, that's the point of the entire thing, right?
Right.
But I like that the movie takes its sweet ass time in getting to Matthew Broderick, because now after all of this setup, we finally cut to him, and what's he doing?
Right.
He's playing Galaga in an arcade in the 80s.
Right. We finally meet the main character, which is pretty rare in a movie of going through several scenes before we get to the main character.
Yeah, and when we meet him, he's doing computer stuff. We just see he likes video games. He likes his classic 80s arcade games, and he's a good dude. But he's not book smart, shall we say?
I think he's super resourceful. Like he can hack through a security door, can make a phone, hotwire the phone, the telephone thing. I think he does something else that's not just purely computer. I think it's why he's wasting he's already beyond high school education. Like it's a waste of time for him to take these tests. I think it's more of that, of sure, he could study and take tests, but what's the point of that? He's already doing way more advanced stuff. Computer thing, that's it's way more, he's got different priorities, I think, is a better way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he is beyond all of this because, as we can see, his facility with computers is way beyond his years.
Yeah, he knows where the school secretary hides, writes down the password, so he intentionally gets himself sent to the principal's office so he can just change his grade, and that's the simplest. Why study when you can just change your grade? So we see how kind of sneaky he and clever he is, and resourceful right off the bat.
It's a fun introduction to both him in this classroom scene with him and his girlfriend Jennifer, played by Ali Sheedy. I don't know if they're actually boyfriend and girlfriend yet, but they're very chummy. It's not clear.
Now, there seems to be a lot of confusion on this next question, asexual reproduction. Could someone tell me, please, who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex? Miss Mack! Yes? What is so amusing? All right, Lightman. Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Get out, Lightman.
This is probably actually for me the most unrealistic part of the movie, that nerdy computer guy all of a sudden attracts the most gorgeous girl you've ever seen. and she has basically a motorcycle, and they ride away no helmets.
I mean, he's still Matthew Broderick. He's a good-looking dude.
Of course, yes. A little movie disbelief, but I mean, she's the most charming and delightful part of the movie for sure. So yeah, we go along with it.
Yeah, she's a good actress. I feel like she didn't. It's a shame she didn't do a whole lot more. Because she's got so many gears, right? This character is so wildly different from her character in, say, The Breakfast Club or Short Circuit, even, right? To go to another computer thing.
Another time, Short Circuit, about a artificial intelligence, a computer robot coming to sentience and figuring stuff out. And,
yeah, a military robot too.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like there might some of the military people might be the same people. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, they just give the teacher a hard time. And as you said, they go to the principal's office. And while he's there, he pulls open a drawer with a bunch of words crossed out on it. And we quickly suss out, he'll tell us later, but these are passwords for the school's computer.
Another thing this movie introduced into the public consciousness of computer passwords. Who knew that was a thing, that you needed to password protect your computer? We wouldn't have to do that until the late 90s, when you had your email sign in and the internet and devices started being set up to you have to put your password in for your laptop or your phone. That wouldn't happen for another 10 or 15 years. So
yeah,
another first in this movie, right?
But it also speaks to one of my favorite things in any movie where there's people having to break into things, or heist movies and stuff, which is and this will actually come back. This team, or some of these folks, went on to make Sneakers, which we covered earlier this year. And some of the best parts of that film and this one as well are there's all the high tech stuff, but sometimes the low tech stuff, right? Just taking a chance to glance at these words. He doesn't have to hack to get the password, just to look and be clever.
We're making an educated guess as we're going to see later in the movie how he hacks into the Whopper by doing a little bit of like research.
Yeah. So yeah, they go back to his room and we see his computer set up. He's got this giant, I mean, the old floppy disk, the real big ones.
Yeah.
Just fun to see some of those. Hello, my old friend, these weird pieces of technology. But anyway, yeah, he hacks into the school. He changes his grade from an F to a C. He changes Jen's and she's like, I don't like it.
Are those your grades?
Yep. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done. Do you have a middle initial?
K, Catherine. These are my grades.
How can anybody get a D in home ec?
If that's none of your business, can you erase this, please?
No, it's too late.
What are you doing?
I'm changing your biology grade.
No, I don't want you to do that. You're gonna get me in trouble.
No, nobody can find out. There, you just got a C. Now you don't have to go to summer school.
Change it back.
Why? They can't possibly just...
I said change it back.
Okay, okay.
I guess I better get going.
Thanks for the ride.
Yeah, okay. Bye.
Bye.
And he says, okay. And he changes it back. But then after she leaves, he flips her F to an A. Which that reminds me of that scene from The Simpsons where, like, I think Bart tries to change his grade from, like, a D to an A. And it's like, a D becomes a B so easily. You overreached. You know? So we cut to NORAD and we see, like, chairs are being removed, right? As signs that, like, the chairs that the two guys at the beginning of the movie used to sit in are gone because they've been automated. Yeah. Their services are no longer required. And lots of
we're installing a panel that, like, hooks up to the Whopper, like, some sort of access hookup.
Yeah. So we cut to dinner at the Lightmans. That's Matthew Broderick's family. And he sees an ad for these video games developed by a company called Protovision. And so he's distracted with that. But a couple of funny things about the scene. I noticed Dad butters his bread and corn simultaneously. I was like, that's a great little life hack. But they're all mad because the corn is apparently raw and Dad doesn't care. Like
right. The wife thinks it's great that it's so crispy. And he's like, of course it's crispy. It's raw.
Yeah. Dad is super checked out, which I love. And so he gets the number for Protovision. He tries to hack into it. Meanwhile, so after that, we cut to Jennifer finding David at the arcade. He's playing Galaga again, and she wants him to change his grade after all. And he's like, I already did it. So he lies.
Right, but another excuse to get her back to his room, hang out with her. He wants to hang out with her, so
he wants to hack into her too.
Yeah.
So he's still trying. He's got his computer set up to try and find this Protovision company. He tells the computer to just basically, he figures out what, like, general, like, area code it's in and tells the computer, just start dialing numbers randomly until you hit it.
Yeah.
And he says, the computer found a bunch of valid numbers while it was doing this. So one of them was like a bank. He finds an airline and says, like, hey, we can make reservations for a trip to Paris, which they do.
Yeah.
And then they find this logon that goes nowhere. They can't get into it. And he asks for help. There's no help. And so he tries help games, thinking maybe this is Protovision. And he gets, amazingly, a list of games.
Right.
Including Falcon's Maze, Blackjack, Guerrilla Engagement, a bunch of other stuff, and Global Thermonuclear War.
Right.
Like, I love that, like, he doesn't even, at this point, question what he might have hacked into.
Right. Well, yeah, it seems like this is what he's looking for is a game company, and these seem like all sorts of games they could be working on. So yeah, does some research. He figures, like, he takes it. He has some computer guys he knows, I guess, at the local college that he goes in and asks, and another great casting of these two these two guys. And one of them figures, well, it's like the name of the game is Falcon's Maze, so look up this guy Falcon. Maybe he has something to do with the program. So that, and I mean, the score of the movie is great, but particularly the very electronic theme that's playing as he's wandering around the college library or whatever sort of thing he's searching through, is such a great electronic song, which is another kind of newer thing in movies, that you would have a score with like, synthesized music like that.
Yeah, again, reminds me of Tron a little bit, right? This is similar kind of synth sounds for this score. Yeah. Those two dudes at the university, I know the one with the higher pitched voice did a lot of like voiceover cartoon work, but they reminded me so much of the two bug experts that Jodie Foster goes to visit in Silence of the Lambs. They're like the comedy version of those guys.
Theater-wide biotoxic and chemical warfare. This didn't come from Protovision.
You bet it didn't. Ask him where it did come from, Jim. Go ahead, ask him.
I told you already.
Looks military to me. Definitely military. Probably classified, too.
Yeah, but if it's military, why does it have games like checkers and backgammon?
Maybe because those are games that teach basic strategy.
Jim, how do I get into that system? I want to play those games.
You're not supposed to see any of that stuff. That system probably contains a new data encryption algorithm. You'll never get in there.
Hey, I don't believe that any system is totally secure. I bet you Jim could get in.
Yeah, I bet you couldn't.
I bet you he could.
Well, you'll never get in through the frontline security, but you might look for a back door.
I can't believe it, Jim. That girl's standing over there listening, and you're telling her about our back doors?
Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head, back doors are not secrets.
Yeah, but Jim, you're giving away all our best tricks.
They're not tricks.
What's a back door?
Well, whenever I design a system, I always put in a simple password that only I know about. That way, whenever I want to get back in, I can bypass whatever security they've added on. That's basically what it is.
Yeah?
Okay, you really want to get in, find out as much as you can about the guy who designed the system.
Oh, come on, I don't even know the guy's name.
Where are you guys dumb? You guys are so dumb. I got this thing all figured out. I figured it out all by myself.
Oh, yeah, Melvin? How would you do it?
The first game on the list. Go right through Falcon's Maze.
Well, the skinnier, nerdier guy was in Greece. He's the nerdy guy from Greece.
Right.
And he was in a bunch of, Revenge of the Nerds and, inspired TV shows and movies. And the other guy, I forget his name's like Maury Chatkin. And he's always some sort of creepy loner, possibly serial killer, dirty cop. He played Harvey Weinstein in Entourage. He plays some weird dude in was it called like Entrapment with Sean Connery and what's her name? But he's always playing this guy that like is a very sleazy, just sketchy dude. And this is role, he's kind of just a normal slobby computer guy.
Right.
He's kind of likable, right? But most roles he plays, he's a very unlikable guy.
Yeah.
And he's really, I mean, he's 160 something roles playing guys like.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised we didn't see more of them in the movie. I thought they were really great, like memorable characters. I was kind of hoping they would pop back in as like allies at the end of the movie to help him, break into NORAD or something.
Right.
Yeah, but I still like what we get of them here. But we find out a little bit about this Falcon guy. We find out he died in 1973. He was really interested in teaching machines to learn. That was, he was an AI expert.
Right.
And we found out that it was kind of sad. He was 41, and we see this picture of a child.
So old. So old.
So old. So old at 41. Anyway, right, we see his son, who we find out his son and his wife died in a car crash. And the son's name was Joshua. So that is the clue that Matthew Broderick seizes on. Says, well, maybe I will try Joshua as the password. And he's in. And while he is logging in, we see the Whopper back at NORAD like spring to life. And it starts talking to him. Greetings, Professor. How do you feel? And I love like this first conversation with the computer because it's asking all these questions. You know, it thinks he's Professor Falcon, so it's like, oh, we have not heard from you in a while. What, you know?
Right, it misses him. Like the girl says, "Oh, it misses him." Like,
yeah,
implying some like emotional connection. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Another kind of interesting parallel that I just thought about was that, you know, in the Imitation Game, and I forget the name of that, Turing, like he called his computer Christopher after his childhood friend. And in this movie, and I'm not sure if this is just a coincidence or they're, you know, getting it as a little inspiration, but yeah, of like Falcon has named his computer after his kid Joshua, and not, you know, and not calling it the Whopper. And in Imitation Game, you know, the official name is Colossus or something like that. But they give a computer like a really sentimental name. And so yeah, it's an interesting kind of coincidence or similarity that I thought was kind of interesting.
Right.
Because they modeled the character of Stephen Falcon off of Stephen Hawking. Like, it's not really that much of a stretch, but and he was originally supposed to be in a wheelchair, but that was like the inspiration for the character. And, you know, we changed, you know, Hawk to a Falcon, basically. Not just a tiny little tweak to not get sued. But.
Which is interesting because Stephen Hawking is not a computer guy. You know, he's an astrophysicist, but, you know, noted very smart person. So
right.
And the computer asks, you know, probably the most memorable line of the movie: "Shall we play a game?"
I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent. It's been a long time. Can you explain the removal of your user account on June 23rd, 1973?
They must have told it he died. People sometimes make mistakes.
Yes, they do.
How can I talk?
It's not a real voice. This box just interprets signals from the computer and turns them into sound.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
I think I missed him.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love to. How about global thermonuclear war?
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
Later, let's play global thermonuclear war.
Fine.
All right.
Which side do you want?
I'll be the Russians.
Please list primary targets.
Who should we nuke first?
Let's see. How about Las Vegas?
Las Vegas. Great.
Right.
I like that David basically jumped straight to like global thermonuclear war. And like,
yeah, let's not. He's like, would you like to play a game of chess?
Yeah.
And he's like, no.
Yeah, even the computer is like, shouldn't we just play chess? And he says later, let's play global thermonuclear war. Which side do you want? I'll be Russia. List the primary targets, and they're, you know, him and Jen are having fun. Like, yeah, let's blow up Seattle because we live here. Woohoo! Because why would you think this was dangerous in any way? It shouldn't be. But we cut to the command center where it's like, you know, warnings, alarms, people are running all over the place, and the general wants to know what the hell's going on.
Right. All hell's broken loose with no sort of reason why.
Yeah, they're already talking about we got to get the president and vice president out of here.
Scramble the bombers.
Scramble the bombers. Take us to DEFCON 3. Time to impact is 8 minutes. But strangely, despite all of these warnings from the computer, the satellites are not detecting any actual launches.
Right, exactly. It's like there's no way that we would have detected the launches, and so it's like there's no way our systems or they, you know, that could happen. So they expect that something's not right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we got to David's dad just complaining about the fact that, you know, the trash cans are in disarray. You know, he needs to get down and fix it. Life is going on at the Lightman house, but so David just powers down his computer, and when he does that, like most of the NORAD screens go dark.
Right.
So we can see what David is doing does have some kind of like immediate effect on what's happening in NORAD.
Right. Because the computer's playing a game against him, and it can't play without an opponent. So it stops that simulation from happening. Because essentially, David is launching the attack, right? So he stops inputting any sort of control over the Soviet side of the simulation. So the simulation stops.
Yeah, and exactly. A guy comes like screaming into the room, like, it's a simulation, warning everybody that somebody on the outside sent a signal to trigger a simulation. And they know at least that it came from somewhere in the Seattle area, which like already we should be like extremely concerned that like it's a simulation, but like somehow like even though the part of the machine knows it's a simulation, the other parts of the machine, like no one in NORAD is able to just detect that. They have to deduce it from the fact that there's no observable satellite or missile launches.
So apparently this actually happened, and it happened while they were making the movie, which is just kind of a crazy coincidence. But apparently someone did leave a simulation tape in a computer at NORAD, and it caused a similar event where for, I don't know how, a few minutes, they thought that the Russians were launching a full-scale assault. And according to the producers, they just happened to turn on the TV, and Walter Cronkite was making this report. And because they were a little apprehensive about, is this plausible? Like, are people going to go along with it? And they just happened to turn on the TV, and lo and behold, this is something similar happened, to where someone confused a simulation, with reality, due to like, this is a new, computers are still a new thing that are being incorporated into, and so apparently this did happen.
Yeah, and this is like one of the scariest things about this, which is like, on the one hand, if you have an intelligent computer, it can make its own decisions and do things, maybe that we can't control. That's the Skynet side of this, right? Where it just decides, fuck these humans. This is a slightly different thing where it's not as smart as it should be, right? Where like it is smart enough to like launch missiles or potentially cause an actual nuclear war, but it's not smart enough to like overcome like the flaws in its programming, where like it should notice, like, I'm playing a game. I should not be scaring the crap out of everybody and actually firing up the missile silos. Right.
Well, essentially, it doesn't know the difference. The computer doesn't know the difference between a simulation and reality, because there is no reality to the computer. It's all a game.
Yeah. To me, this goes back to, as all kind of, AI questions like this, you kind of can go straight back to 2001. And the interesting thing in 2001, right, Hal goes quote unquote crazy and kills most of the crew. And in Kubrick's movie, they don't explain why that happened, and you're left to kind of wonder. In the sequel, 2010, they do give a definitive explanation, which is that it's a logic bomb problem,
right,
that causes Hal to do this, where essentially Hal is programmed to lie to the crew, but he's also he's programmed, he's told he needs to keep secrets, but he's also programmed not to lie to the crew. So the logic bomb solution is, well, if the crew's dead, I don't have to lie to them anymore.
Right. The computer's being given contradicting orders, and so it basically, like, it blows up the program. It doesn't know how to behave in a situation where it's getting conflicting instructions.
Yeah, there's lots of movies that deal with this, not the computer making decisions side of the paranoia, but the fallible programmer side, right? Where like, that's also kind of at the heart of the David Cronenberg Fly as well, right? It's like, the dumb computer did what computers do. It followed its instructions, and because I didn't properly figure out all the if-then statements, this horror is the result, right?
Right.
It's the real life blue screen of death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where if you tell the computer, like, the next, the second statement is false, and the second statement says the first statement is true, it puts the computer in this loop, and that uses all the computer's processing capacity, because it's like the statement's true and false at the same time, and a computer can't operate in that environment where a computer, it either has to be true or false. It can't be both, or it can't be oscillating back and forth infinitely. And that's usually some sort of logic bomb is used to defeat a computer, and like your Star Treks or other shows of like feeding this computer like something that it can't solve, a problem it can't solve.
Right.
Right.
Divide by zero.
Right. Which is something they could have done to perhaps defeat the computer, but of course they come up with a more elegant solution.
Yeah.
In the end of the movie.
So David comes home, and Mom is very excited that he passed all of his classes. Imagine that. But the news is covering that some sort of computer malfunction caused a panic yesterday, and David puts it together that he might have done this. And he runs to his room where the phone is ringing, and it's Jennifer. She's calling because she's screwed because of the grades situation. And he says, well, that if you were screwed because of that, they would have come to knock on your door already. So, but
right.
Ditch that number. Don't she tells ditch the number you hacked into. Never call it again. Play it cool. David starts tossing his printouts, his clippings, his research, everything. But the phone rings again, and it's digital. It's the Whopper calling him back.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Oh my God. Incorrect identification. I am not Vulcan. Vulcan is dead.
Sorry to hear that, Professor. Yesterday's game was interrupted, although primary goal has not yet been achieved. Solution is near. Game time elapsed 31 hours, 12 minutes, 50 seconds. Estimated time remaining 52 hours, 17 minutes, 10 seconds.
What is the primary goal?
You should know, Professor. You programmed me.
Oh, come on. What is the primary goal?
To win the game.
I love that he says, like, it keeps thinking it's, you didn't call me back, Professor Falcon, and he tells it. Falcon is dead, and it's just something like, sorry to hear that, Professor. Yesterday's game was interrupted. Like, it does not compute. Falcon is dead.
Right.
And I don't know if that's because, as we'll find out, Falcon is actually alive, and maybe the computer knows that, or because it doesn't understand life and death, period.
Yeah, it probably doesn't understand life and death, or those are just the to it would just be parameters in it's WarGames of like, oh, well, I'll just reset it. You can be dead, and then we run the next simulation, everyone's alive again, right? It's death is not a permanent condition to this computer because it's just running simulations over and over. Billions of people die, and then I run another simulation, oh, they're all alive again, and I reset reality basically. And so I don't think even if it does know what dead and alive are, it's not permanent. It's completely resettable. But what's interesting, I was going to say is that which I didn't know until recently, was John Wood, the actor who plays Professor Falcon, voiced the computer, and they had him read the lines backwards so that the inflections of the words would sound like the computer's just drawing from a database. And they probably use some sort of vocoder or voice box to get it to sound more digital. But John Wood has an amazing voice. Like when we run into him, is just really musical the way he talks. So very impressive.
Yeah, I really like the text to speech parser sound that they use here for the Whopper. It's like, it's kind of threatening and childlike at the same time. And I think that fits, right? Because like, that's kind of the danger. It's almost like, yes, we've given a toddler the launch codes, right? That's the scary part. And it tells us at this point, it gives us a ticking clock. There's time left on the simulation. It's, I don't know, a little over 2 days worth of time left. And And David asks, well, what's the goal? And it says, you should know. The goal is to win the game. And so he hangs up. It calls back.
It won't leave him alone.
Doing that. And we know 52 hours remain. And so David goes to get a Slurpee or something at a 7-Eleven and comes out and is immediately arrested by G-Men. And they give him a tour of NORAD, which, I mean, they took him a long way. Like, NORAD's in Colorado. David lives in the Seattle area. So they took him, roughly, the 1,500 miles,
right? So
give or take, something like that.
They track him down. They arrest him, and if we got into that part where they track him down, they arrest him outside the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
And they do read him his rights, but I think I read like they would actually think it was his parents. Like logically, they wouldn't know it was him. They would just know it was somebody in the house. And legally they would need to take him to the parents because he was a minor. But anyway, besides the fact they just, I mean, I think in this situation, because it's such an exceptional situation, they probably could bend the law a little bit like this kid did, hack into nuclear missiles. Like, I think they'll just, sidestep the habeas corpus. I
was going to say World War III is happening in a little under 2 days.
We gotta cut some red tape here. And then we see like there's a tour group in NORAD, and apparently this is a thing that happened regularly. Like even the producers of the movie took a tour, and they get this poor person on the some lady on the tour to like trick her into hitting a button, and a loud siren goes off, and the guy joking is like, "Oh, you hit the wrong button," you start, and then they're, "Oh, it's just welcome, visitors from wherever." And I'm like, that is probably the sickest joke you could pull on someone. Like, I would think most people would be crapping in their pants if they thought they hit the wrong button and start World War II, and to be like, "Oh, just a joke, just a friendly."
I experienced something a little like this once, not nearly as extreme as, oops, I started World War III. But when I was in, I think, high school, I don't remember. But there was a summer program at University of California, Irvine, not far from where I live. And it was like a science thing. And so while you were doing this summer science thing, they'd take you around to some of the different science facilities on the campus. One of which is they have a nuclear reactor on campus that's for research purposes. It's not meant to generate a lot of power, but it's a scary ass, like it's a big tank of water, and at the bottom there's glowing shit, and it's like, you don't fucking know. And so at some point we're all standing, at a safe distance, looking at this, and they hit a lever or something, and there's just this loud metallic clang. And the main lights go out, and the thing glows brighter more, like in an instant, just bang, and like a heart attack I did not need, like just horrifying. And I was like, basically, again, this prank, not quite as large scale.
But yeah, that's pretty inappropriate. I mean, talk about triggering some trauma or something, in somebody unnecessarily. Like, I think that's a little over the top of like tricking. And do they do this for every tour? Like they're pranking, like, and all, who are these, local politicians and college professors and things like that. I think it's, I mean, even though they like, tell them like, "Oh no, it's just a joke," but just for that, 8 seconds or whatever, I think you would be like out of your mind.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And so the guys, they're having a meeting without David. They're trying to figure out how the hell did this kid break into the Whopper. And he claimed, he says, "Oh, well, this kid claims he was just trying to play video games." And he said, the computer called him back, and like no one believes any of this. And they say either they don't believe he did it, or at least they don't believe he did it, by himself. Maybe he had help from someone in the USSR, but the general tells Dabney Coleman, "You go talk to David," which he does. He goes to meet him, and he tries to play nice. He uncuffs him. And he says, "Let's walk down to my office," and they're chatting about his time working with Professor Falcon, and he explains what DEFCON means, defensive condition, that 5, 4, 3 to 1 being World War III, and And he says, we're a 3 now. And so he interrogates him more. Why did you go in? He says, Joshua called me. And he says, machines don't call people. He says, well, this one did. And he says, well, what about the reservations you made for a trip to Paris, which sure looks like a getaway? And he didn't actually buy tickets to Paris.
He's like, who you're working with?
Reservation. Yeah. And he says, I want a lawyer. And he goes, not yet. But the phone rings and Dabney Coleman has to leave. But this is a great, watching him kind of soft pedal David.
A good cop.
It's you could bring in Jack Bauer to cut his fingernails off or whatever, but they're going to start going, good cop on him first. And they keep, again, there's still more discussion, right? How did David do this? How did he get into the Whopper? Did he have help? But we're down to DEFCON 3. And while he's in this room that has a computer terminal in it, they left him alone in a room with a computer.
Don't they lock him in some sort of supply closet first that he hacks out of, and then he goes to the computer? I forget exactly at some point.
I think because I think he's in Dabney Coleman's office.
Right.
They leave him there. And so he logs into that to be able to talk to Joshua. And it asks, are you still playing the game? Yes. They talk about projected kill ratios of 70 million people on both sides dead.
Right.
And he asks the computer, is this a game or is it real? And the computer responds, what's the difference?
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Joshua.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Hello. Are you still playing a game?
Of course, I should reach DEFCON 1 and launch my missiles in 28 hours. Would you like to see some projected kill ratios?
69% of the housing destroyed. 72 million people dead. Is this a game or is it real?
What's the difference?
Oh, wow.
You are a hard man to reach. Could not find you in Seattle, and no terminal is in operation at your classified address.
What classified address?
DOD pension files indicate current mailing at Dr. Robert Hume, a.k.a. Stephen W. Vulcan. 5 Tall Cedar Road, Goose Island, Oregon, 97.
Look, can I just talk to Mr. McKittrick? I think I know what's going on. Can I talk to Mr. McKittrick, please?
The computer is confused that he's not talking to him from his classified address.
Right.
Which is our clue now that Falcon's not dead. He's hiding somewhere.
Yeah. He's retired and reclusive computer scientist trope.
Right. But before he can get that address, he is now nabbed again and charged with espionage.
Right.
As he's screaming, he's going to start a war. We got to call Falcon. All this.
Right.
Stuff. And this is where he gets thrown into a holding cell.
Yeah, or a supply closet. It has a computerized lock, which he expertly and resourcefully hacks into, and there's an MP that's supposed to be guarding him that's hitting on the secretary. So I mean, it's sort of this is also plays into this classic 80s movie trope of the kids know what's going on more than the adults, and the adults don't treat the kids as like a serious threat, and so the kids are usually able to up the adults because the adults are like, that's just a kid, I'm gonna hit on the secretary, or they underestimate the kids, and this is through all there's so many 80s movies where this is going on, from the Goonies and you name it, any movies that have, and this is a pretty new thing in film, of having the main characters be so young. If you go back into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all the protagonists are fully formed adults, and because adults get get things done and do stuff that matters and have romances. And so it's like as we get into the 80s, we have all these like kids films where it's like the kids have this special ability because they haven't given up on life and they know what's going on, know what the future is bringing. They can, they're the ones that have the answers, and which this movie is totally really, full foot on the gas all the way for this kind of vibe.
Yeah, thank you, Steven Spielberg.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, E.T. Right,
Right,
stuff like that. And yeah, but as you're right, but for some workplace harassment, the world might have ended here. Because this guard's flirting with his nurse while David is scrounging, and he cleverly finds like a dictaphone, and you're like, what's he gonna do with a dictaphone? And he asks to use the restroom. He says that doesn't work. He says he wants to talk to McKittrick, Dabney Coleman. That doesn't work. He basically ends up right back in this room. But he's able to record during these interactions with people on the outside, these tones of people pushing on the keypad on the outside of the door with the dictaphone, which he now uses to figure out on the reverse side of it, how to hack the lock.
Right. He plays it back and then opens the door.
Yeah.
So
super resourceful. It's great. I don't know if you could really do this, but in the logic of cinema, it works great. And I totally buy it.
So this is actually related to a real world thing that happened around that time, to where someone figured out that if you play back the tones into the phone system, that you can basically take control of the phone company's computer and make free calls and do whatever. And there was a whistle that came in the Captain Crunch cereal that played this exact tone by coincidence. But there were people that took it a few steps further, and they were building these things called blue boxes in their garage that could reproduce all the tones, so that would give them complete control over phone systems. And there was another guy that would win those. When a radio station said to our 17th caller, "You have a chance to win this," well, this guy could basically hack the phone system, so he would be the 17th, block everyone out, and just call 17 times and win the sweepstakes. Of course, he got caught bragging, but we see David do something similar with, he needs to make a call, but he doesn't have any money, and he goes to the payphone and he uses like a detachable soda or beer can tab, which was another thing we don't have anymore, to jump a circuit to make a free call. And so this all plays into this kind of real world phone hacking, which was the precursor to computer hacking. So really resourceful kid here.
Yeah, I mean, he knows his software and his hardware.
Yeah,
right. You have to know a lot about how circuitry works to do all this. Yeah, in proprietary stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So he hacks the door and he sneaks out. And so when he slowly makes his way like through the facility, through like an elevator shaft, right? And he ultimately gets onto the bus with the tour as it's leaving.
He's caught, but the stupid adult thinks he's part of the tour, so it helps him escape, basically.
Right. Yep. Kids rule. And so they figure out, the brass are like trying to knock down the door to the room where he's supposed to be locked up. That they're freaking out, and all of this as a misdirection gives David time to handily get away with this tour bus.
Right. And then he hitches a ride on a logging truck, and we don't know where the heck he is, but he calls his girlfriend, who, to send him an airplane ticket. But of course, she just drives however many miles to pick him up, because this is like they wanted more of Ali Sheedy. Ali Sheedy was so great. They wanted her back in the movie. Like originally, that we never saw her again. She sends him the ticket. But they were like, this girl's so great. We also need some kissy romance in here, which, was definitely appreciated. And she is so ride or die. She is the ride or die girlfriend that every guy in the 80s totally wanted. She's going to drive, I don't know how many hours, pick you up and help you find this hermit, computer scientist and save the world. Like it, it's great. It can be bad.
That's such a good instinct. I mean, you could make the back half of this movie without her, but she enriches it so much because, she brings this great spunky, kind of can-do energy. She's there as you said, she's ride or die. Like she's there to help him, even though her capacity to help. She doesn't have the technical knowledge he has. She's still very savvy. She can swim. That's true. I'm a little tired of people who can't swim in movies. Do you know anybody who can't swim?
A big red flag. I'm telling you.
Yeah. This is a plot device, is what it usually is in a movie. Having someone say, "I can't swim."
Right. Well, Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid. There you go. That's where it starts.
You can dog paddle. You can figure out a minute.
Yeah.
You can figure out how to not die in shallow water. Anyway, so yeah, and this is, as you said, this is where he does that hack with the payphone. Like he unscrews the end of the receiver and like uses that tab. It's really cool to watch.
Right. Goose Island, Oregon, please. The number for Dr. Robert Hume, Hume, on Tall Cedar Road.
Checking under Dr. Robert Hume, Hume, on Tall Cedar Road. I find no listing.
What does that mean? He doesn't have a phone?
I'm sorry, I have no listing.
Oh, wait, Falcon. Dr. Stephen Falcon, Falken, at the same address.
I find no listing for Dr. Stephen Falcon, Falken, on Tall Cedar Road, Goose Island.
Thank you.
And interspersed with this, we get shots of the Whopper, right, with the time ticking down. Yeah. There's one of the Whopper, since we haven't really described what it looks like when you see it. It's almost a coffin, like it's this big, or a sarcophagus. It's a big rectangle that's gray, covered in blinking lights that they're like Star Trek lights. They don't mean anything.
It's got a lot of WPOR with periods, and right on it. We know what it is. I actually had a friend that had to rebuild it for a commercial, some Super Bowl commercial, like 15 years ago, because they apparently keep this man. They never keep of any prop. If I asked you, you could have one prop from this movie, the obvious answer is I want the Whopper. But apparently they've had to reassemble this like 2 or 3 different times for commercials for horrible sequel we won't mention to this WarGames Dead Code. They actually, they had to make another one, and it's like, where's the original? Like, this is a definite one of the greatest movie props ever made. And if anyone, if any prop you'd want to have out of any movie, this was it. So,
and it has there's one panel on it that has what sort of looks like a face. It's got kind of these square, things that you could see as like eyes, and it's got another one below that. It's sort of, it's not meant to deliberately look like a face, but it's one of those things that triggers that part of your brain that's designed to see faces and things.
Yeah, anthropomorphized. Like, well, of course, Hal had the red eye thing that was kind of creepy, but yeah, similar type of thing of like we want it to have some resemblance to a human being.
Yeah, and we're also supposed to, I think, see just a little bit of the dead kid in it. It's kind of, it's hard to call it innocent, but it sort of is because it doesn't know any better, right? It's just a machine.
It's childlike. Its consciousness is very new, right?
Yeah.
Learning about the world.
So he calls Jennifer. She's like stretching. She's this whole thing. She wants to get onto this like workout show, and like this is the most like 80s workout thing you've ever seen.
She got the leg warmers on. Yeah.
Yep.
It's great.
But things are ramping up at NORAD, and now like Russia is calling, basically going like, what the hell's going on? And America's desperately trying to call Russia and say like, I know what it looks like. We're not starting World War III. We swear, and so, yeah, people are trying to like keep a diplomatic lid on things before the shit hits the fan. But yeah, he goes to the Salem airport, and Jennifer's there to meet him, and they decide we're going to go to Goose Island, where we understand that's where Professor Falcon is hiding out under an alias.
Right. So
they have their first kiss here, but not like a full kiss. Like she gives him like a kiss on the temple or something.
Right.
So, and now we get to the island, and they're walking along, and they are savaged by a pterodactyl kite.
A remote control pterodactyl. This is like something when, you watch the movie as a kid, you're like, I want one of those. Those exist? Like, we had the technology. Like, I remember I got into remote control airplanes like several years later. That was, so this was a thing. But back in the day, like, we didn't have the internet. We couldn't look up, the one company that was making these things. And to me, this was like, if you had to be a millionaire to afford a remote control pterodactyl, like, it probably wasn't that expensive, but You know, it was kind of funny. This is like a toy that every kid would totally want, but it's not in any store. Like someone definitely dropped the ball here.
Yeah, that's some great tie-in merch. Absolutely, it's cool. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, I want that. I bet my son would love that.
How come that was never a thing? Like,
yeah, time to go on Amazon and look. See, can I get
Yeah.
that? Yeah, and we meet the pilot who is Falcon. You know, and they basically try and bargain with him, and he's like, basically, get off my island. But they invoke the name of Joshua,
Right.
and that gets his attention.
Yeah.
And so now we cut back to the Whopper, and like shit's getting more real. We're down at DEF CON 2. There's the screens are back on. They're showing something's penetrating Alaskan airspace. And we have a pilot who we understand. We don't see the pilot, but we're hearing him over the radio, who has been sent to intercept whatever this thing is that's incoming towards Alaska. And he's radioing back like it's just blue sky. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So again, it's the same as before.
Yeah, and they had, you know, they cleverly have Professor Falcon really interested in dinosaurs, who of course went all extinct, and there's a parallel between like the extinction of the dinosaurs and the extinction of human beings, and he's like, it's no big deal. We had a good run. The dinosaurs were like here for, you know, hundreds of millions of years, and they're all gone, and nature will just restart. And there's a great line where, you know, the kids are trying to convince him to do something, and you know, Ali, she's like, you know, I've never done all these things, like I'm only 16, and Falcon says this. I mean, this line is like so chilling, and he's like, perhaps we could do something to buy you a few years, time enough for you to have a son and watch him die.
Did you know that no land animal with a body weight of over 50 pounds survived that age? Extinction is part of the natural order.
Bullshit! If we're extinguished, there's nothing natural about that. It's just stupid.
Oh, it's all right. I've planned ahead. We're just 3 miles from a primary target. A millisecond of brilliant light, and we're vaporized. Much more fortunate than the millions who'll wander sightless through the smoldering aftermath. We'll be spared the horror of survival.
I'm only 17 years old. I'm not ready to die yet.
You won't make a simple phone call?
If the real Joshua was still alive, your Joshua, you'd do it, wouldn't you?
Look, we might gain a few years, perhaps time enough for you to have a son and watch him die. But humanity, planning its own destruction, that a phone call won't stop.
This is unreal. You don't care about death because you're already dead.
It's just like, whoa, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's an interesting performance because like he's fairly cavalier for basically talking like the Joker. You know, because this is so, what he's talking about is so nihilistic that like, my son died, so all of humanity can go. We like you said, we had a good run. We're not worth saving.
Yeah, he's become fatalistic of like, that's why he's checked out. He's moved to this island because he's kind of throwing his hands up. He's seen where things are going, and he feels like I probably messed things up more than I've helped by trying to do the right thing. And you know, he's checked out. His son's dead. He doesn't have anything for directly. So you know, these two kids are kind of pleading at him to do something, and he's like, yeah, I've you know, it's everybody ends up dead anyway. What's the point? kind of attitude, right?
Yeah, some men just want to watch the world burn. You know, right. Very much like that. You know, I almost wish they had gone a little like more chilling with him. You know, I don't know if it's something with the score or something with the way he delivered some of these lines, because he's so just like, oh well, I'm British and we're all going to die. You know,
right. Well, he has that other line they give him. Then he's like, listen carefully. Go to path, gate, open gate, go through gate. You know, run, ferry. Like he's giving them computer instructions. And I thought that was a really brilliant way to kind of established that he's like a computer programmer, and that sometimes he just gets fed up with normal speech and he just wants to program stuff.
And he doesn't see other people as humans either, right? Like they're just, he says something like, when he says extinction is part of the natural order, he says we'll be spared the horror of survival.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Which is like, he understands not everyone will die in this thermonuclear war. Some of us will be living in vaults and
he's
Fallout mutants.
Yeah, you're better off dying than having to live through the apocalypse. And I think that's a really great point.
Yeah.
And then all these people that are trying to, build fallout shelters and stuff. It's like, what, you're on the off chance that there is a nuclear war. Like, do you really want to survive? So.
Yeah. Grim. And David calls him out, right? He's like, he says, what was the last thing you cared about? He tries to appeal to that. There's some part of his humanity still alive. And he just tells him, you missed the last ferry. You can sleep on the floor here, at the house. And so, but they decide we're just going to leave. They're going to go look for a boat or some other way off this island.
And all they want him to do is make a phone call to tell the NORAD people this is simulation. And he's like, yeah, you won't make a simple phone call. I don't think does he have a phone?
Well, and that's the thing about, like, again, how smart is the computer? Because it is a simulation, but as we'll see in a little while, it's firing up the engines of the real missiles.
Yeah.
Right. So at some point, even though it's not clear, like, does it think it's a simulation or not? Like, is it going to still nevertheless launch a whole bunch of ICBMs? So, the fact that it is quote unquote a simulation may not matter in the final calculation.
It's programmed to win the game, and so it's run all these simulations of how to win the game. So once it's essentially programmed to want to do the real thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's I think what's driving it. Even whether it knows like reality or not, it's running the simulations, but its prime directive is to win the game in the real game, and it's been hooked into the real equipment to it's trying to fulfill its purpose, the purpose that it's given, right?
And so we get a quick shot of, like, again, more panic at NORAD. We find there's like almost maybe 10 hours or less remaining. The computer at least shows all these nuclear subs closing in towards the US. Obviously, as far as we know, they're not really there.
Right.
But we get this scene now of David and Jennifer kind of walking on the beach of Goose Island, talking about the things they had hoped they would have done if they got to live. They can't swim off the island because David can't swim.
Right.
What kind of an asshole lives on an island and he doesn't even have a boat?
Maybe we can swim for it. How far do you think it is?
No, it's 2-3 miles at least, maybe more.
What do you say? Let's go for it.
No.
Come on.
No. I can't swim.
You can't swim?
No, I can't. Okay, Wonder Woman, I can't swim.
Well, what kind of an asshole grows up in Seattle and doesn't even know how to swim?
I never got around to it, okay? I always thought there was going to be plenty of time.
I'm sorry.
I wish I didn't know about any of this. I wish I was like everybody else in the world. And tomorrow it would just be over. There wouldn't be any time to be sorry about anything. Oh, Jesus. I really wanted to learn how to swim. I swear to God I did.
Did I tell you that next week I was going to be on TV?
You're kidding.
It's an aerobics show that's on in the afternoon with some girls from my dance class.
A movie star.
Yeah. I know. It's kind of stupid, huh? I mean, nobody would have been watching me anyway, I guess.
I would have.
And there's kind of like, I never kissed a girl before. Someone says that, right? I've never kissed anyone before. And so we get the kiss, and right? And then the helicopter shows up, right?
Yeah, this I had a definite memory of. I know I hadn't seen this movie in a long time, but I remember the scene on the beach and a helicopter comes, and they're like freaked out that it's, they've been found by the government. But as we see, it's just Falcon.
Right.
Apparently, he has a helicopter to go with his pterodactyl robot.
He went up to bed and somehow got a helicopter. It got in a helicopter, got a helicopter there like within minutes, and had a change of heart. Which is convenient, but they got to it. They got through. He needed to have a moment to process things, and he came around. So yeah, we all go back to NORAD, and there's the great scene of they're locking everything up, and the giant door is closing, and they have to squeeze through, and then we see all the bolts and pillars, lining up and locking everything in. It's a great iconic thing that has been another Fallout, a major thing that's influenced games and shows like Fallout of this is a giant vault.
That's exactly what it is.
That you need bomb shelter. This is how you survive a nuclear war. You need a 10-foot thick steel door
inside of a mountain.
Instead of a mountain, Crystal Mountain. And I think is it Crystal Palace? I think is what the code word uses. I think it's in Terminator 3, they go to a place called Crystal Mountain. And so I'm not sure if this is based on a real military, code name. It might be. So, but yeah, if you're out there and someone says something about a Crystal Palace or Crystal Mountain, they're talking about a nuclear fallout shelter. So,
yeah. No, so yeah, exactly. They race down the tunnel. They get into the vault at the last minute. The missiles are targeted and ready. We skipped something. Back at Falcon's house, there was a discussion about playing tic-tac-toe. And they talk about this is a boring game. It always ends in a tie. So I just want to make sure that's out there. We did herald what's about to happen.
That is a really good thing that I want to talk about. It's he says used to play tic-tac-toe, but you don't anymore. Why? And she's like, it's boring, nobody wins. And Falcon says that's an important lesson that I couldn't get Joshua to learn. And they're like, what's that? The lesson of futility, right? And so he interprets, because he's basically that's the reason he's not helping, is that he thinks it's futile, and it's about giving up, and he's given up. And so that is a really interesting take on it, because they eventually use the lesson or metaphor of tic-tac-toe to convince the computer, the only way to win the game is not to play. But it's not that it's to give up, but in a good way, and not this negative futility giving up that Falcon has adopted to his life. But it is the eventual lesson that we have to teach the computer to essentially give up. But that's an unwinnable game. And essentially we've programmed this computer to win a game that can't be won. And that's the logic bomb. It's contradicting, like we talked about earlier, it's contradicting orders of you have to win a game, but it's unwinnable. And this is what's making the computer go kind of nuts.
Yeah, and we're not quite there yet. There's actually a really interesting fake out that happens before we get to the climax.
Right.
So that we got a lot of Dabney Coleman and Falcon are kind of getting into it, and they're begging, tell the president, call off the attack. And I think at some point they actually name drop that it's Reagan. It's not a fictional president.
Right.
We're in real 1983.
Right.
And I love that the plea that's made of do you think the Russians would really do this? Why? Because the Russians have to know what we would do in response.
Right.
And I like that, something about do the world a favor and don't act like a machine. We're back at the beginning of the movie, right? Wait a minute. Shouldn't we verify? Why should we just blindly follow this, right?
Right.
It's a bluff, John. Call it off.
No, it's not a bluff. It's real.
Hello, General Barringer. Stephen Falcon.
Mr. Falcon, you picked a hell of a day for a visit.
General, what you see on these screens up here is a fantasy, a computer-enhanced hallucination. Those blips are not real missiles, they're phantoms.
Jack, there's nothing to indicate a simulation at all. Everything's working perfectly.
But does it make any sense?
Does what make any sense?
That.
Look, I don't have time for a conversation right now.
General, are you prepared to destroy the enemy?
You betcha.
Do you think they know that?
I believe we've made that clear enough.
Then don't. Tell the president to ride out the attack.
Sir, they need a decision.
General, do you really believe that the enemy would attack without provocation, using so many missiles, bombers, and subs, so that we would have no choice but to totally annihilate them?
1 minute and 30 seconds to impact.
General, you are listening to a machine. Do the world a favor and don't act like one.
1 minute and 20 seconds to impact.
And there's 1 minute left to impact, and like basically they convince him, don't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, when this impact happens, like don't retaliate, do nothing, and the humans decide not to do it, and so the countdown goes all the way to 0. Nothing happens.
Well, they get like 3 different base commanders on the phone on the phone, so they can talk to, like, they're supposed to be the first 3 things hit, right? And so if these people can still talk back, they haven't been hit. Like there's obviously, they're not getting confirmation that this is really going on, and there was nothing to provoke the Russians. And why would the Russians launch this unprovoked full-scale assault? And so yeah, we're still trying to convince the general and McKittrick that this is all a fantasy. And so yeah, it convinces them to wait for the response until we can really 100% verify that it's real. Like, we don't want to mess up. And so the sound, we see all the big screens and the missiles coming in, and then we see they have all these strobe lights set up, right? But we see whenever a missile on the screen makes an impact, it has a big white circle of like what the area of effect is.
Missile command, literal missile command.
It is like missile command, and this the sound that they play is like whatever, when the missiles, it's such a great sound design thing that they decided on, of this kind of low frequency tone of these missiles making an impact. It's a great effect for essentially the climax of, we're at the climax of the movie here. And yeah, it's really all the bells and whistles are going off essentially in this most expensive set that's ever been made. Yeah.
But again, everyone's thrilled. Nothing happened. The Russians didn't really attack us.
Yeah.
But the problem hasn't been solved because again, the simulation says, well, we must retaliate. Right. And so it starts firing up the real missiles. And so they have to get Russia back on the phone and say, well, good news, bad news. We confirmed you didn't attack us, but our machines think you did. Right. And we may not be able to stop them from attacking you. So do what you want with that information.
Right. And I think there's an element of like the Joshua is getting them to lower the DEFCON rating so that it can take control, because I think they've set up the system to where the machine can't fully take control of the missiles until they've declared DEFCON 2 or 1 or whatever. And that's what the machine is doing by faking them out, is to get them to scramble the bombers and do the things it can't do, and basically give it permission to take over. And it's basically hacking through all the possible codes to launch the missiles. It doesn't, because they're like, it can't launch the missiles, it doesn't have the codes, but it's like the computer is hacking through every single possible code that there could be, and it's slowly getting access to, it's going to eventually get those codes. And so yeah, we still have a huge problem here.
And it's literally a mirror of what David did at the beginning of the movie. Like, just tell the computer, just keep dialing numbers until you get something.
Exactly.
Right. That's what Joshua's doing. It's just basically, however many digits this launch code is, 00001, 0002, and eventually, it will hit all 10 of these codes, and then it will launch, and then we're well and truly screwed.
Yeah. General, the machine has locked us out. It's sending random numbers to the silos.
It's gonna hit the codes to launch the missiles.
Just unplug the goddamn thing. Jesus Christ.
That won't work, General. It would interpret a shutdown as the destruction of NORAD. The computers from the silos would carry out their last instructions they'd launched.
Well, can we disarm the missiles?
Over 1,000 of them. There's no time. At this rate, it'll hit the launch codes in 5.3 minutes.
Mr. McKittrick, after very careful consideration, sir, I've come to the conclusion that your new defense system sucks.
I don't have to take that, you pig-eyed sack of shit.
No, I was hoping for something a little better than that from you, sir, a man of your education.
General, it's the president.
What are you going to tell him?
I'm ordering our bombers back to fail safe. We might have to go through this thing after all.
I love it. I think at one point the general just says, "Your new defense system sucks." Like,
Yeah.
You know, he's got to say.
And he
what we're
says
all
something
thinking.
like, "I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it would help," which apparently is
Yeah.
also like a 100% improvised.
It's great. And so like nobody can get into the computer to try and give it some alternative instructions,
And they can't unplug it either, because if they unplug it, that would
will
trigger
launch.
because that would be like it's been destroyed. That's another kind of fail-safe thing built into the system. So yeah, they don't have a lot of options at this point.
Right. And so, but David finally has the brainwave that's going to save the day, and he says, "Well,
Right.
let's tell it. It wants to play games. Tell it to play a game." And so they try like chess, ID not recognized, no good. Poker, no good. The global thermonuclear war, it says, "I'm already in the middle of that game, no
Right.
good." And then he realizes there is a game that's not on the list,
Right.
tic-tac-toe. Let's see what happens when you tell it to play tic-tac-toe. And then it starts playing, and they're like, "Well, there's no way you can win the game." And David says, "Is there a way to tell it to play itself?" You know, he says, "Yes. Instead of saying 1 or 2 players, tell it 0 players, and the computer will play itself." Which leads to Joshua, like an ever increasing, like the tempo of these cats games,
Right.
it goes faster and faster and faster until everything shuts down.
Right.
And we get the great, kind of end line, not the ending line of the movie, but like the conclusion.
What's it doing? It's learning.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Hello, Joshua.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. How about a nice game of chess?
Right. Of like the only way to win is not to play. And they're, while it's going through this process, I think, somebody asks like, "What is it doing?" And Falcon or David said, the Falcon, I think, says, "It's learning." And then, David, I think in one of the kind of the cheesier lines in the movie, but it seems realistic, is like when David is like, "Learn, damn it."
Yeah. It's funny.
It struck me
Because-
as like, nah.
Yeah, because after it plays all of the cats games of tic-tac-toe against itself, then it starts playing out global thermonuclear war against itself. And it's like,
Yeah.
everyone's dead, everyone's dead, everyone's dead. Same thing. And that's when, it says, the only winning move is not to play. And it's an amazing idea of like, because he didn't instruct it to play global thermonuclear war against itself. In fact, it's a little
Right.
weird because they tell us its function has been to run simulations of nuclear war. Like, it hasn't learned this yet, though.
Yeah, you would think that it would be running all these simulations, but already, and has gone through all these. But I think maybe its intention when it was running the simulations wasn't, really playing against itself in a way. It was trying to predict what the other people would do. So yeah, there's a little bit of a wonkiness to this of like, why didn't it kind of figure this out before?
Well, because it didn't understand metaphor. Like that's the thing is like the tic-tac-toe games are a metaphor, and the computer's artificial intelligence is able to actually extrapolate the metaphor of what happens to tic-tac-toe. Because they don't instruct it to try this on global thermonuclear war. They just tell it to play tic-tac-toe against itself, and the computer spontaneously takes the lesson learned from tic-tac-toe and then applies it to war.
So yeah, it's a true AI. And then once, of course, it stops. It seems like they immediately like start dismantling. They're like, okay, is it good? Okay, we're gonna unplug this thing right now.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, how about a nice game of chess? What's interesting is like, it's a good thing they didn't pick chess for the metaphor, because chess was developed as a way of expressing a battle with a clear winner and loser. Which, like, thank God he didn't tell it to play chess against itself till it learned something.
Well, maybe it would end up in a stalemate every time. Like, so.
You hope. Yeah, that would be the idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some cheering. There's, rubbing of heads. We're back to DEFCON 5, and that's the credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a great film. I'm so glad you brought this to the podcast to revisit, because I as much as I haven't watched it in a long time, I can't, there's so many times when like the only way to win is not to play, that pops into my head. Like, yeah, there are definitely times where like futility is a valuable lesson sometimes.
Yeah, which is kind of an ironic lesson of like, yeah, no, choose your battles, know when to throw in the towel. A lot of those things that we're, maybe we're not taught as kids growing up. It's like, oh, just try your best. You got to know what your strengths are, what you're good at, that's the game. And so it's like, stop beating your head against the wall. Like, don't always go for the direct approach. There's always different options to explore.
I have kids, and they're 6 and 9, and one of the things I've learned in raising them is perseverance is one of the greatest human attributes, and also one of the worst, because sometimes it's like you need to give up. This is you have to learn.
Or you can be thick-headed, like it's at some point it becomes self-defeating of sticking to your guns or whatever. Yeah, being stubborn.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a really great, there are a lot of great lessons in this movie, and not, like, let's not give computers complete control over stuff. That's a good lesson.
Well, computers are so binary, right? They really are. And so much of we define everything by winning and losing, but we as humans can change the parameters of like define what winning actually is.
Exactly.
Right? That's how you get around the perseverance, like stubbornness problem, is to go, banging my head against this wall is not getting me anywhere. I can, if I want to quote unquote win, I need to walk away and try something else, change, adapt in some way.
Right.
And that it's hard to learn.
Well, like the quote, I forget where this comes from, but it's like the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Right.
And Joshua learns that here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been kind of talking around this a bit, but here we are at the end. Why do you think this movie is still worth a watch? Why does it still resonate? And why will it endure? For a long time to come.
I mean, we're still dealing with, computers are even a more and more a part of our lives now than they've ever been, and they will continue to be. We went through a period of time of like, okay, the Cold War is over, and we can kind of relax. But now things with Russia and China and Pakistan and India have nuclear missiles, and like all of those countries have systems that could be hacked that we have no control over how good their security is. And so what if someone hacks into Pakistan's, nuclear, gets their nuclear codes or something like that? So it's like we've gotten back into this, we're a little bit more on edge about nuclear war now, with more countries having nuclear warheads and, rogue states like North Korea, or there could be terrorists with a dirty bomb or whatever. So, a lot of these things are still in our consciousness, and are actually more in our consciousness than they were when the movie came out. So yeah, with like AI, AI taking over, nuclear war happening, hackers hacking into stuff and shutting down, power grids and fuel systems and all that. It's more of a thing now than it's ever been. So it's great to watch this movie and see like where at least the origin of these concepts into the public conversation and zeitgeist came from. And this movie has influenced like countless other movies, and has all sorts of movie connections, not just because like everybody in this movie is in another 100 movies after this, but all of the themes that the movie deals with. And it kind of sets up the look of like, what does NORAD look like? And so if you're going to make another movie that deals with this, it's like, well, it's got to kind of look like this, because this is what we think is authentic. And I think when they showed when people that actually worked in NORAD, they saw the movie, they're like, wow, I wish our stuff was that good. And they actually could program all this stuff with an Apple II computer, right? Which is pretty crazy, because we know that's like a very rudimentary computer. And how computer games and simulations, like how involved and how widespread that is today, of like everybody's playing computer games as adult. Like back in the 80s, adults wouldn't play computer games. That was stuff for kids. And we've pushed past that to where it's like people of all ages, or at least our age or younger, are still playing computer games, or see the value of simulations and like what we can learn from that. Ronald Reagan saw this movie and asked his cabinet, like, is this possible? Can someone hack into our systems? And they were like, we're going to look into that. And it actually led to Reagan signing a presidential directive to establish security on our phone and communications and computer systems. So it's this cycle the movie has with like its imitating art and imitating life. So it's really crazy how everything came together at that one moment, and how this movie like encapsulates like everything that was going on at that time, that would continually causing ripples that are still going on today. So that's why you should see this movie, kids.
Yeah, as I was watching it, I was thinking, I'm generally, overall, I think the batting average on remakes is pretty low, but there's an argument to be made that like if not a direct remake of WarGames, I think we're probably due for a movie generally, again, Strangelove or Failsafe or whatever, where like the end of the world is, or at least thermonuclear war is on the table, right? That's the focus. It's like, hey, Chat GPT, tell me how to make a hydrogen bomb. We're at this point. And
right.
As you mentioned, like, all these other countries have nuclear weapons. And it's like, yeah, well, the nuclear bomb was invented in the 1930s, right? Like, how long can you hold back other countries from getting their hands on 100-year-old technology at this point?
Right.
It's, you can't stop a country from making a typewriter.
Right.
The secret has been out for a long time as to how to do this. The science is old. And so we're now having to live in this world where like, the bomb, the ability for a country to get their hands on the raw materials and make a bomb, literally everybody could be armed with one of these. And the lesson of this movie, right? This lesson is, again, like mutually assured destruction writ large, of like, the only way we avoid these catastrophes, is our luck as a species on this front. The only way it works is, again, like with the Cuban Missile Crisis and in this movie, right? The only way to win is not to play.
Right. It's a no-win scenario. It's a game that nobody wins. And so, yeah, don't play that game.
At least mutually assured destruction. As long as everybody's on the same page, you hope that's enough to stop everybody from making that move, knowing that the counter move would, it would be pointless.
Yeah.
But we're always kind of, this is one of those movies that kind of reminds you like the ice you're standing on is thinner than you think.
Yeah.
And you don't want to think about it too much.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me like what, generation I am, and I was born like the late 70s, so very much like an 80s kid, but it's like pretty much like the Cold War vibe growing up at that time was sort of influenced your worldview. And then once you get, in after the, we had an era like after the fall of the Soviet Union up until, at some point it kind of came back around, or, maybe in the late 20 teens, I don't know, when we had a little bit of a lull where it was like, whoo, don't have to worry about that anymore. But then we kind of slowly creep back. So there's a definite like, Cold War generation that spans from, sometime in the late 50s, or like when there were nuclear submarines and ICBMs, when those were, because when in World War II you had to use a bomber, and there weren't hundreds of nukes, like there was like one or two at a time. So at some point, we got to that point where there's like intercontinental ballistic missiles and long range strikes and nuclear subs, where that came into our public consciousness of like, oh, now there's enough nuclear weapons in the world to blow up the entire world, right? So it wasn't immediate from the first bomb dropped. It took a little while to get up to critical mass, pun intended, to where, and like the late 70s, early 80s was probably the epicenter, pun intended, of like the Cold War culture, of like how you're kind of the way you view global politics, or the situation aside from your local activities. So we had a little bit of a lull there for a while, and then we're kind of back into this. Well, this seems like it's pretty similar to what we were dealing with back in the early 80s. So it's That's why you
what
should.
A totally tubular time in the early
exactly.
80s.
Rad, man.
Yeah, radical. So some heady stuff for tonight, but I'm glad we spent the time to talk about it. So BT, if people want to find you, where do they find you? Anything to plug?
Not really. I play some bass gigs every once in a while. But yeah, if I can help out someone as being a guest on a podcast, love to talk about anything that's Cold War related, apparently, and other things that are related to pop culture and 80s and sci-fi and those related things and movies. It's right up my alley. So hopefully I keep it interesting, and if someone needs a guest, hit me up.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we had you back a second time, man. This is a great discussion. If you want to get in touch with Nostalgia Arcanum, just go to any of the social media networks or YouTube. You can find us in any of those places. The links to all that stuff is in the show notes, so just pop over there and find it. Also, if you have some time, do check out our sister podcast. I do a second monthly show with my wife and my brother-in-law called Playing by Ear, which is a musical podcast. Each month we take an album and break it down track by track. It's been a lot of fun starting that up, so go look for Playing by Ear. And if you have time and are so inclined, please do drop a review for the show wherever you found it, whether that's iTunes or Podcast Addict or whatever your portal is of choice, because leaving reviews for podcasts, not only does it brighten our day and make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but it also helps the algorithm that helps expand the podcast reach, introduces it to new listeners. So that's digital word of mouth, but also we like regular analog word of mouth. So if tell a friend that you listened to it and had a good time. So and of course, if you want to know what's coming up next, you got to follow us on BlueSky, Instagram, or Facebook. because every Wednesday I'll post a clue as to what the topic for the next episode will be. So look for us there. BT, man, thanks again for coming by.
Hey, man, it was fun.
All right, so until next time, that is one more entry in the Nostalgium Arcanum.
Please sit down. I've been briefed. Do we know why Guardian wants control of the nukes?
There are two theories. One, it wants to prevent humanity from destroying itself.
Well, then what are we worried about? Let's get some stuffed crust pizzas in here.
Theory two, it wants to wipe humanity from the face of the earth.
Maybe we should make those pizzas regular crust. If the nuclear-capable states don't give Guardian launch control, it plans to detonate a siloed warhead in each country.
How is this even possible?
Professor, can you explain?
A query clause based on a function test finds all object versions that match the results of the function.
Okay, just stop. It was a mistake to ask you to explain. Major?
After the 1983 movie WarGames showed us human personnel wouldn't key a nuclear launch, we switched over to an automated retaliation strategy run by computer. I saw WarGames. It was great. Matthew Broderick's first film.
Actually, the same year but earlier, he was in Max Dugan Returns.
Gentlemen, you seem to have forgotten that Ali Sheedy was also excellent in WarGames.